What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking another look at the Marvel Superheroes two-player Countercade from Arcade1up 2 years later. Was it worth it? That's right, you heard me correct. It has been 2 years since I purchased the Marvel Superheroes two-player Countercade from Arcade1up. $230 was the original asking price, and I paid that. And I did a review of this cabinet back in September of 21. Did a complete unboxing and a review at the time to let you know what you could get if you bought one of these. Then later on, just a couple weeks later, I did another video where it was a complete teardown to let you know what was going on inside. Now, here we are 2 years later. It still functions, obviously. It plays pretty much the same. And just so you know, beyond the teardown video I shot, I haven't even attempted to mod this in any way. So bearing that in mind, it's got some moderate play. The screen it's been on for a long time. Every time I would go down to the old arcade and turn all the arcades on, all the Countercades would light up and they would stay on. And it got, some play. Not as much play as some of the big boys, some of the three-quarter scope cabinets, but it got some play. So it still looks good. The screen is big and vibrant, and that was one of the big surprises because on those first and second generation Countercades, the monitor really wasn't that good. It was washed out pretty severely, especially when you went kind of left and right. But this was not the case. It's a beautiful 8-inch screen, looks great, still looks great to this day. You can obviously see that it still has the lit marquee. It still functions. This was the first generation to include the lit marquee. So back then, that was really kind of a big deal. We were still getting some products from Arcade1up that did not include lit marquees. Big Buck Hunter, anybody? Oh, wait, that's still going on today. Moving on. So we're not going to talk about Big Buck Hunter. We'll continue talking about this Countercade that was packed with a bunch of features for the size. You had a headphone jack over here on this side, a USB port on this side that was supposed to be for a second player controller, which I never understood because you've got two players. In my mind, the USB port would have been better served on a single player cabinet, and then that would give the ability to have a second player play, but wouldn't really necessitate having two players on the actual cabinet itself. You would still have that option, but it reduced the size, and some people really don't like this form factor, which is probably the biggest number one complaint that a lot of people have, is the fact that you have the wings. I thought it's really cool to have two players on such a small, tight form, arcade, but some people don't like that. But if you're looking at this and you dig it, what is it really worth to you to have this? Once again, let's go over the games list, though, because that's something to really take a close look at. If you look on the bottom here and you scroll through the menus, you can see that you've got Marvel Superheroes. Obviously, that's the title of the cabinet. You've got the Punisher, which is a beat 'em up. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more in detail. X-Men versus Street Fighter, and then Marvel versus Capcom. So you have two of the versus games on here. You have the title, the marquee title, which is Marvel Superheroes, the actual game itself. And then you have the Punisher. Now, the reason the Punisher is something you want to pay attention to is because this was only one of the three different ways you could actually get the Punisher on a cabinet. Disney owned the license for Marvel, and they're not real big on the violence of the Punisher game. I mean, if you played the beat 'em up, there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of death, killing, but this is all video game violence. So in my mind, what's the big deal? In any event, because of the content of that game, you're not going to be able to get the Punisher in any current iteration from Arcade1up. So you could have got one of the Marvel Superheroes three-quarter scale cabs, and they came in two different variants. Actually, three. There was a Sanwa version, a limited edition version, which came with a plaque, and then just the regular version. The only difference really being blue T-molding versus like an orange T-molding. No big deal there. But the only other way you could get this, besides the three-quarter scale, was the sit-down head-to-head cocktail-style cabinets, and that really isn't everybody's cup of tea. So if you missed out on the three-quarter scale, you're not going to be able to get a new one unless you try to find one, and you're kind of out of luck. They're probably never going to make a deluxe or an XL that includes the Punisher. The thing about the Punisher is that it's also a beat 'em up, so it kind of changes, that adds a little bit of replay value to this cabinet, in my opinion. With all the other two-player Countercades, you had basically the same game or the same genre of games. So it's very much purpose-built for that. But adding Punisher, a beat 'em up at all, really adds some replay value. So is this worth $230? Well, much like all of Arcade1up's products, they're never really worth that original asking price. Very rarely do they hit that target right off the bat. So at $230, I do think this is overpriced. $100 is definitely a buy for sure. You want to go ahead and do that. But what do I really think this is worth? I think that, at the time you had $300 and $400 three-quarter scale cabs, and the fact that this was more expensive than half the price never made any sense to me. But now you have to consider the current climate. Deluxe cabinets are $500 right off the bat. So that still puts this about at $230. Would put this about half the price of that still, just a little bit under. I think realistically, you should feel good about paying about $150 for this. I think you're going to get your money's worth out of it. Obviously, 2 years later, it still works, it still functions. End of the day, do you like those games? And if you don't like those games, because of this USB port on the side, the modding community has come out with a few different ways to sort of hack this thing. If you want to take a look at those videos, do some searching on YouTube, and you'll be pretty surprised by what you find. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on the two-player Countercade, the Marvel Superheroes two-player Countercade from Arcade1up. I do like these games a lot, so definitely this is kind of a no-brainer for me. It's the reason why I've kept it over all the other ones. And if you are a fan of the Capcom fighters from the 90s, you really can't go wrong with this, as long as you can get it for less than $150. Anyway, thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the channel. You have a blessed day, and I will see all of you next time.